Gaijin have finally added medium-range active radar homing missiles to War Thunder, and with that the game can now finally move from the BC timeline into the AD timeline. Now if you've been living under a rock and you don't know what an active radar guided homing missile is, it's essentially a missile with its own radar in the front. And this is important because it means that up to a certain point, that once the missile's radar actually takes over the target tracking, you can then turn your radar off and let the missile guide itself into the target. Now you can see this is what I did in the footage here as well, as I fired at this guy at about, I don't know, 20 miles or something. And then I obviously assumed that he'd fired a missile back at me, so what I could do is I could turn the radar off, let the missile sort of guide itself in, and then I could turn my plane and fly away from his missile, or fly away from the danger, if you will. And this is why at the beginning of the video I said that we're basically switching timelines in War Thunder now, because this is huge. In the real world, this is like a huge thing, and I think in War Thunder, at least with the multi-pathing changes coming in as well, this is quite significant. Like, I think this is gonna switch the meta up quite significantly. Obviously, it's one day after the patch. It's a little bit early to be talking about the meta, but I do think these new missiles are indeed effective enough to actually utilize new tactics now, right? It's not just deck hugging meta or something. There's actually an advantage to climb up to 30,000-40,000 feet now, and that's what I want to talk about and sort of showcase in this video here today. Now, you might have already noticed, but we're flying the G-Eagle here, which is the F15J, the new Eagle that the Japanese tech tree got. And if you ask me, this is probably the best plane in the game right now, or the best Eagle at least. And the reason for that is that it's almost half a ton lighter than the American one for some reason. And of course the fact that because this thing sits in the Japanese tech tree, it means that you can play against the Americans in the EC game mode, i.e. on the red side, meaning that you can actually find matches in EC now and not have to gimp yourself with the equipment that you have to use. Now that might sound kind of trivial, but trust me, if you play this game mode a lot, especially with friends and you like to squad up with people and stuff, this is a really, really good thing to have in a plane. Now I do just want to take a second and talk about the AAM-4 missile, as it is unique to this aircraft for now. As far as I know, in real life this missile is akin to something like an AMRAAM C5, which means that it should be significantly better than what we have in game right now, which is probably why it's not got its real life performance right now. However, me and the boys on the Discord are kind of under the impression that it might be a little bit bugged. I mean, there's some like wonky stuff with its fin deflection rate, which basically, you know, determines how quickly a missile can change direction mid-flight and stuff like that, as well as it having like a super strong boost phase, which means it accelerates really fast, but it can't really sustain that speed very long, as well as it seems to also run into like a hard speed cap as well. So we're not quite sure what's happening with this missile right now. It's definitely not a bad missile. I'd say it's still one of the better ones to pick, but if you do have the choice between this and the AMRAAM, which you do get on this F15 here, then I would just recommend you take the AMRAAM, just because overall it just seems to be a more reliable package. However, I am recording this on the 20th of June, which is the day after the update, so who knows, pay attention to the forums, because maybe in a week they'll change it, you never know. Now, if I could direct your attention to the gameplay here for a second, I fired at this dude at about 30 miles, and I know he has a friend there as well. Now, I was expecting a missile to be fired back at me, of course, so I keep him on the gimbal limit of the radar. I turn towards, kind of like a 45-degree angle to the left here. Basically, it just makes it, if the missile notification does go off on the RWR, it makes it a lot easier to defend for me. However, I wasn't sure if my missile was actually going to make it, so I decided to risk it, turn back in, fire off a second one, and obviously the first one does hit. But now I've got a missile notification on me. You can see how close it is on the RWR there. I'm not sure, that is only like a couple of miles away, and I'm not even going supersonic at this point. But I can pretty much, I mean, it's hanging back there, but I am outrunning the missile. It's not catching me at this point, and you can see, I think it's kind of hard to tell on the little mini player here, but I'm actually pulling away from it, and this missile is going to keep following me for the next, like, I don't know, like minute or two as well, because the battery life on them is so damn long, but they're never actually going to catch me. And this is something that I also want to talk about. This is something I think a lot of people were really scared about with this update, especially with the whole multi-pathing thing being lowered to 60 meters. Like, people really did, a lot of people had the impression that we're just not going to be able to dodge these missiles at all, and it's simply not the case. The no escape zone of these missiles, or the MAR, or the minimum abort range, whatever you want to call it, isn't that huge really on the AMRAAM. If you have a little bit of speed going, especially like if you have a little bit of altitude or something, most of the time you can just kind of turn your plane around and just go full throttle, and you will be able to outrun it. I mean, you can see here I skipped forward in time a little bit here, but I basically turned around, and that was the same missile that's still kind of following me. Like, yes, it's still tracking me, I'm still getting the warning notification, but it's never going to catch me. Now, in this next bit here, I made a couple of mistakes that I just want to go over. Now, you can see there's a couple of radar contacts on my screen, and they're all fairly close and in front of me, and they're all pointing their nose towards me. I fire a missile off at the first guy, and I try and get the one behind him. Now, the kill I just got there was an F16 I fired on earlier, but as you can see on the radar screen here, the guy I just fired the missile on has now pointed his nose towards me. Now, multipathing has been reduced, but it's still fairly easy to do, especially on flat maps like this, like Sinai and stuff. So he could have easily just fired a missile at me here at this point. I should have fired that and just turned around. But I get greedy, but I get lucky with him. He didn't actually end up shooting at me. I get greedy though, and I push in even further. Now I get that F16 there, and I push in even further. I should have turned back at this point because we're quite close to their spawn. I wanted to get that one missile off, and I see the missile launch notification on the RWR. I try and turn away, but at this point I was just too close, and there was probably someone over towards the right that I just didn't pick up on my radar. Now the mistake I made there is I got greedy. I went too deep into their side of the map. You know, obviously they're all coming from that direction. I was just outside of their spawn, and ultimately I just got overwhelmed. And this is something that people, especially like the RB community, I think has been complaining about. Now I get RB does play differently to EC, that's not what I'm on about, but it means you can't cover off every direction. You want to be firing into the melee and not out of the melee. You need to be thinking 30-40 seconds ahead at any given time, because that's just what air combat kind of is nowadays. Is you need to you can make a mistake and then pay the price for it, like 30 seconds after that, and then you confused about what you did wrong, right? You need to think ahead, and this is the point. And it's not like this kind of thing is new to War Thunder. I mean, you have the same sort of concept of even a prop tit, right? Where you're in a classic dogfight or something, you make a mistake, you make a wrong turn or whatever, you pull a little bit too hard, cash into a little bit too much energy, and then it's 20 seconds later where he actually ends up getting the shot. So it's not a new concept, but there's just different things to worry about now. Like, I mean, the last patch we had the AIM-9M meta, and you could get yourself into hairy situations, but something like an AMRAM has much more range than an AIM-9M, of course. So there's a lot less, let's say, visual feedback for you to sort of like instinctively react to, and if you haven't really been paying that much attention to your avionics the last couple patches, you really need to start paying attention now, because the RWR is essentially your lifeline right now. I mean, the radar's good, but your RWR tells you if someone is, it has you in a TWS lock and has potential missile out on you from 20 miles away. You need to just sort of keep, you need to be aware of this stuff. If you see an F15 that's continuously pinging you on the RWR, and he's already like, the chances are he has you in a TWS lock, and there could be an AMRAM on the way. You need to think about this, you need to anticipate this stuff, and you need to react accordingly. And obviously if you're up in the corner of the map and you don't really have any way to turn without running into the map border, then that is a little bit of a problem, and you need to plan for this with the routes that you take through the map. It's a completely different way of playing than I think what most people are sort of used to, and I think this is why this was just so scary for people as well, especially when the whole multipathing debate came up in the forums. The thing is, like, the actual combat itself, BVR combat, AMRAMs against R77 and stuff, that's not too difficult to pick up and learn, right? It's more about sort of managing the chaos, learning how to deal with the chaos of an online match. I mean, the maps we get here in EC are 128 by 128, well, the big ones at least. Obviously there's smaller ones, and 128 by 128 kilometers, I mean, it's a big area, but for 4th gen fighter jets it's not huge, and it would be nice if we got some bigger maps, but chances are right now we're not going to be getting any bigger maps anytime soon, so we're just going to have to learn to deal with this. And you can see this in the footage. This is exactly what I'm doing. I'm not flying low, I'm not trying to create a furball, I'm not looking for dogfights. I'm actively trying to stay away from the enemies. I'm trying to stay high, I'm trying to stay fast, I'm trying to stay aware, and fire off my AMRAMs from ideally something like 20 miles away, because it keeps me out of danger. And if staying alive for a lot of people, I think that should be a priority, because the way sim is right now, the payouts are not great. You should in fact be playing like this, and you can see for me it does it's working out. I'm actually getting kills like this and I'm not dying too much, so yeah, it kind of works out. Obviously, if everyone plays like this, then yeah, I won't get as many kills, but then at least the fights will be a lot more interesting as well. So, a lot of people say BVR is kind of boring because it's just like, you know, firing missiles off from like 40,000 feet. The thing is, like, BVR is boring when you're up against someone who can't really defend themselves, or they don't know how to defend themselves. Then it's boring because it's just an easy kill. However, if you have someone that really knows how to fight you, that's when it even gets a little bit interesting. I mean, I don't know, debate me on that in the comments, but I don't think BVR is boring if you're actually up against someone competent. Now, one thing I do want to touch on real quick, and this isn't specific to Sim or anything like that, but I think stock grinding planes now is going to be an absolute pain, and I think Gaijin should really consider changing something about this. At least, you know, something like having default chaff or something, right? Especially if they plan on reducing multipathing further. Or maybe even go as far as give us some, you know, Fox 3 missiles, you know, just like 2 Fox 3 missiles as stock as well, or at least all of the IR missiles instead of just 2 AIM-9Ls or something on a lot of these planes. I'm not actually sure what the default Fox 2 missiles are for these like new jets here, but even if it is like 2 AIM-9Ms, having 2 short-range IR missiles just isn't really gonna cut it against someone who's, you know, like playing like I am right now. I don't think I've even fired a single Sidewinder in my entire play session last night, so yeah, I just think it's going to dissuade people from getting multiple of the same plane, right? Like, if you have one F15, why do you now also need the Israeli one, right? Like, it's just they're sort of shooting themselves in the foot a little bit. I know they're not gonna change this in a hurry at all. I know what Gaijin's like, obviously we all do, but I definitely think this is something that needs to be looked into in the future, and I don't think the community should just, you know, like, sort of hold its tongue on this for too long. So, believe it or not, I did actually manage to get a dogfight in last night, and this is just after I'd fired off some AMRAMs at some people. And yeah, I was running into the mountains for some cover. Turns out there was an F15 in front of me locking me up. I quickly dived to the deck to abuse multipathing. As you can see here, it just kind of ends up trashing the missile. It's still relatively easy to do, especially on a map like this. I fire an AMRAM back at him, and it basically does the same thing. He multipaths it. Now, I try and reduce as much speed as possible as he tries to reverse to turn. He ends up in front of my guns, and it's an easy kill for me. Now, I left the air brake on him by mistake, but it didn't really end up costing me too much, because what ends up happening is this F16, sorry, behind me. I'm pre-flaring for the AIM-9M, because obviously they're still a thing. I'm not quite sure what he was doing, but I think he must have just thought like it was a safe kill or whatever, and just ended up turning away. I turned my plane towards him, get a radar lock, and fire off an AMRAM at close range. And yeah, as you can see, the AMRAM is also quite maneuverable even at these kind of ranges. Now, yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, take that fight as you will. It was literally just the only one that I had last night, so I thought I'd put it in the video. So yeah, that was my take on the F15J. Obviously, keep in mind, please, that it's a day after the update, so the meta is still kind of developing, and my take on this plane might change in the future. I doubt it will, because the F15 just seems to be in a very, very good place right now. However, I encourage you to try it out, even if you only have the American one or something. The F15 definitely seems to be definitely one of the most powerful planes right now. And yeah, other than that, guys, if you're looking for a sim-orientated Discord server to join, my one is obviously linked in the description as always. As well, if you're looking for control setups for this sim game mode, we have a bunch on the Discord as well as my controller setup video that I made as well. Somewhere on my channel you could find it pretty easily, I'm sure, if you look for it. But yeah, guys, any questions, leave them in the comments, please. Like and subscribe and all that, you know, YouTuber stuff. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Cheers.